much of the fundamental macroeconomic picture do you involve in your analysis?
I think as a global theme investor, it's absolutely essential. You cannot ignore the macro. Nothing exists in a vacuum. So what do is typically, I want to get a macroeconomic oversight of the world or of the area that I'm particularly looking at. So I would say it's a good 30–40% of what I do. The rest of my time is looking at more conventional, what we call bottom-up drivers, individual company drivers or individual sector drivers. And the beauty of investments is actually merging the two, in my opinion. And if there's something that I enjoy doing or feel that I can add value on, it is on, if you like, intellectually blending those two areas just to try to come to something that I would perceive as a truth or as an opportunity or as perhaps an anomaly in the markets where there's perhaps an investment opportunity to come out of it.
Yeah, so do you think there are times when it's you just go on a gut feeling?
Absolutely. Because what Peter Lynch in his book One Up on Wall Street taught me is that intuition and insight comes from a mixture of experience and observation. And so consequently, that may manifest itself as seemingly gut feel, but actually it isn't. It's based on your accrued experiences and insights and replay of things. And it's just that you've got yourself to a point where all of those things accumulate and that leads to an inevitable decision. I always say that all investment opportunities, no matter how complex, no matter how multifaceted or whatever, ultimately come down to 6 bullet points and 2 charts. Everything does. The trouble is, you've got to work out what they are. And that's where the experience and the intellectual interest and the accrual of information over the years, that's where they come into play.
Can you give us a brief overview of your investment style?
So I describe myself as a global thematic investor. And what that means is you've got to look both at the big picture and the small picture. In essence, because I look globally, what that means is I'm interested in everything, which sounds horrible and it sounds almost impossible to kind of countenance or work with, but it's great. Because what that means is actually you can choose to look at things that you find particularly interesting or particularly beguiling at any one moment in time. So there's initially a slightly anarchic element to it, but that's good, because what you're looking for are those 2 or 3 key drivers which say to you, this looks a bit more interesting than average. So what would they be? So typically, I think, because the aim is to always know more than 90% of all the other investors in the market, this was something that one of my mentors taught me. If you know a stock or a company or a sector or an area better than 90% of the market, then you should be able to make money on it if you've identified an interesting investment theme. And actually to do that is not that difficult. What you've got to do is just focus in on points of information which you realise are potentially very important if they play out, and then basically invest accordingly. And because I look to invest over typically a 6 to 18 month period, what you find is those bits of information, they typically would play out in quarterly earnings over the next 2 or 3 quarters, i.e. over the next 6 to 9 months. And what you hope is other investors then start saying, actually, that issue is important, and then they start buying into it. Because let's face it, as an individual, you cannot move the markets. You know, even the largest institution individually would have trouble moving the markets for a sustained period of time in a particular company share or an asset class. What you need is, you need the average investor or the average mutual fund manager to come around to your way of thinking. And that's what I mean. You're looking for an anomaly which then others can then sort of jump on upon. And John Maynard Keynes talked about the beauty parade in investments. He said, you know, it's not about what you think per se, it's about thinking about what the average investor thinks. You know, he used the analogy in a beauty contest, it's not who you think is the most beautiful contestant, if you're on the judging panel, it's what the average judge thinks that matters, that sways the result. And if you apply that to the stock market, what that means is you've always got to be thinking about, well, I know something, but then is the average investor going to switch and change their views to come around to that way of thinking? And if they do, then you should make money out of it.
What about TA? Do you use it in your investing, and are you a chartist? Do you like your charts?
You can't ignore the charts. because what they do is it's the sum total of everybody's view on a stock at any one moment in time, people from different backgrounds and countries and influences. I tend to use it more for entrance and exit points because sometimes you will get resistance or support moments based on technical analysis and charts. But does it lead me fundamentally to make investment decisions? No. Because really as a global theme investor, what I'm interested in is information and insights from corporate reports, from big picture macro drivers and from other trends which can be quantified to some extent. And the technical analysis side would be down there as an influence and observation, something to think about, but really to help me on the ins and outs on shares, not really to lead me to make that initial decision to buy something.
What's your sort of sentiment about TA per se then?
I think, look, some people make it work very well for them. For me, it's just something that I use and observe. So I think it's a useful tool in the arsenal for an investor. But does it drive me to make decisions? No. But I can understand how some people like it. Perhaps they have a different background from me. They haven't got the years of analytical insight and talking to company management teams and thinking about macroeconomics. You know, their approach is perhaps a little bit more quantitative or, in this case, chart-based. And clearly they can make that work for them, and there are people who do that. But for me, it's just another tool to use, but it's not the main one and not the main driver for me.